2 Corinthians chapter number 6, 1 through 10. Hope you're ready for this. This message is, I have 27 points to this message. Yeah, 27 points to this thing. We'll see what happens, all right? And there is no clock, so we'll see what happens. But I honestly intend to make this part 1 and to the 2 o'clock service part 2, okay? We'll see how things go as we get into it and things, but there's 27 points, so that I think that woke a few of you up anyway. Chapter number 6. Let's read here. It says, "We then, as workers together with him, beseech you also that ye receive not the grace of God in vain. For ye say, If I have heard thee in a time accepted, and in the day of salvation have I succored thee. Behold, now is the accepted time. Behold, now is the day of salvation. Giving no offense in anything, that the ministry be not blamed, but in all things approving ourselves as the ministers of God, in much patience, in afflictions, in necessities, in distresses, in stripes, in imprisonments, in tumults, in labors, in watchings, in fastings, by pureness, by knowledge, by long suffering, by kindness, by the Holy Ghost, by love unfeigned, by the word of truth, by the power of God, by the armor of righteousness on the right hand and on the left, by honor and dishonor, by evil report and good report, as deceivers and yet true, as unknown and yet well known, as dying and behold we live, as chastened and not killed, as sorrowful yet always rejoicing, as poor yet making many rich, as having nothing and yet possessing all things." Now, the title of the message is this. It's In, By, and As. In, by, and as. And let's pray. Lord, I thank you for your goodness. I pray you please just bless now. Holy Spirit, guide me, direct me. Help me, Lord, to teach your people your word here that you won't taught. And Lord, I pray for your help. Holy Spirit, please fill me. Please, I pray, change hearts and lives for you today. Please, in Jesus' name, amen. Now, Paul, in writing to the church of Corinth here, tells them in verse number 3 to not live in such a way as to give offense or to cause to stumble in anything, all right, in anything. Because he says what happens when or if we do or they do, they cause the ministry or the ministry of divine things, is what it means there, to be blamed, all right, and such. Now, to be honest with you, this is still true today. Think about it. If a Christian or a church acts inappropriately, all right, a Christian or a church acts inappropriately, who ultimately gets the blame? Who ultimately gets the blame? God does. It all goes back to, that just shows you there, how can they serve a God like that, or how can they, what kind of faith? It all goes back to blaming God. I mean, God gets the blame. God is the one that gets hurt by it. God is the one who is the one that ultimately gets blamed and such. All right, and such. Now, Paul here is telling us to live in such a way as to not to cause this to happen. All right. Now, if we just stopped in verse number 3, that would be enough. I mean, that would be difficult enough and such. But if you notice in verse number 4 starts with the word "but." All right. Paul here is telling us not to give offense in anything in our lives, in our lives, to allow others to blame Christ for their behavior. All right, but also in all things approve or make known. That's what the word "approve" there means. Means make known ourselves as the ministers of God. All right, so he says in verse number 3, giving no offense in anything, that the ministry be not blamed. But, so not just one thing, but now he's including something, but in all things approving or or making yourself known ourselves as the ministers of God, all right, and such. So, in other words, we should not be so paranoid of doing something to shame our Lord that we don't let people know that we are a child of God's. Okay? In other words, Paul is exhorting us to approve or make known ourselves to be ministers of God, all the while giving no offense or no stumbling in anything, because that will cause the ministry of God to be blamed. All right? You understand what I'm saying so far? That's what he's teaching here in verses 3 and 4. But then, if you'll notice with me, here in verse number 4, verses 4 through 10, something else here that Paul does and teaches here. If you look in verses 4 through 10, Paul uses 3 words in telling us how we are to be approving or making known ourselves as ministers of God, keeping in mind that all the while giving no offense in anything, that the ministry be not blamed. All right? So notice with me here 3 words in verses 4 through 10. And by the way, if you look at verses 3 through 10, you'll find that's all one sentence. This is all one thought here. This is all one sentence, all right? And such. So you see the first word that he uses here is the word in. Okay? And then if you go down, you'll find, I believe at verse number 6, he begins to use the word by. All right? And then if you go down to verse number 8, I believe, he starts to use the word as. So we see 3 words. We see in, by, and as. All right? So what Paul is doing here, Paul tells us, Paul tells us how to approve ourselves or make known we are ministers of God using 3 words. These 3 words, in, by, and as. So what I want us to do is look at these today, and I know we're not going to get through it this morning, but we're going to go through, there's 27 different ways here that he uses in, by, and as that we are to use to help us and show us how we are to approve ourselves or make known that we are the ministers of God, at the same time making sure we give no offense in anything, that the ministry be not blamed. All right? So let's go through these. Let's look at these here in things and start in verse number 4. All right? So let's just get right into it here and start in verse number 4. All right? But in all things, approving ourselves as ministers of God, look at this, in much patience. In much patience. What is patience here? What does patience mean here? Patience means endurance. Patience means perseverance under suffering in faith and duty. In suffering, perseverance under suffering in faith and duty. Look, there's nobody that should ever claim that once you get saved, everything is just hunky-dory. There's nobody that should ever say that living a Christian life is easy. Paul never claimed it. In fact, here he's saying, be patient. Have much patience in such. And that's dealing with the suffering in faith and duty. It's easier, and everybody knows it would be easier to live on 100% of your income rather than 90%, would it not? But as a Christian, our duty is to make sure we do tithe. Our duty is to make sure we do give that 10%. And by the way, it also talks about offering. So, but it would be a lot easier to live on 100% than it would be to live on 90% or 80% or whatever it might be. And what Paul is saying is that you have got to be patient. You've got to endure. You've got to learn to endure in the area, in your faith and duty in serving as a Christian. It would be a lot easier to go ahead and send your kids to a Christian, a public school, than it would be to try to homeschool. It'd be a lot easier. There'd be no worry. I mean, you could just send them there. I mean, my land's the public school system. They have buses that pick the kids up right at the door. They take them, drop them off. Almost all the stuff is paid for, and everything else through taxes and such. You have very little cost and everything. It would be easier to do that. But what Paul is saying is that you've got to prove or make yourselves known as ministers of God in much patience, in enduring the things of faith, enduring these things that we as Christians do out of faith and duty. It'll be a lot easier to take and not tell people about Christ. Wouldn't it be a lot easier to not be obligated to go out to strangers and tell people and give them a gospel tract or tell them about the Lord? Life would be a lot easier. You didn't have to have that confrontation, wouldn't it? And Paul is saying here that we need to approve ourselves or make ourselves known as ministers of Christ in much patience. In this, we've got to keep on going. No matter how difficult it might be, no matter how you look at the world and say, you know what, they've got it so much better because they've got this and they've got this and they've got this and they live this way and it's so much. It looks like it's so much easier and such. Well, the Christian life is not supposed to be easy. That's all about. That's what faith's all about, folks. Look, if it was so easy, would we even trust God? No. It's been proven time after time after time in the Scriptures. People, when they had it easy, what happened? They fell away from God. So he's saying you need to make sure you're approving all things in much patience. Wow. 26 more to go. Are you ready? Number two, let's go on. Then it says in afflictions. Afflictions. What are afflictions? Afflictions are burdens. Afflictions are burdens. That's what afflictions are. You see, what's he talking about here? How is it that we are to approve ourselves as ministers of God in afflictions or in burdens? We are to bear each other's burdens. Every one of us has burdens, do we not? Every one of us has burdens that we have ourselves. Everybody does. There's no one in this life that is even saved or unsaved that is burden-free. I don't care if the richest man in the world to the poorest person in the world, the smartest person in the world to the, I'm just going to be politically correct, to the dumbest person in the world. It doesn't make a difference. We all have burdens. Life is full of burdens. And it's enough that we carry our own burden and such, and that's difficult enough. But as Christians, we are supposed to take and bear each other's burdens. You realize that? You realize that we are to take and bear each other's burdens, helping each other? So we not just take on our own burdens, but we're to bear the burdens of others as they go through things. We're to bear the burdens of others and such. Now, you're not going to see the world do any of that stuff. They're just going to let the government do it. We're just going to tax you to death and so that the government could do that sort of thing. That's not how God had it set up. We as a church ought to bear each other's burdens. When somebody in this church is going through a tough time, we as a church ought to be pitching in and going and helping them through it. It's one reason why we started the food pantry. Because that's a difficult thing. When you don't have food on the table, sometimes people get to that point. As a church, we need to make sure we have, and people don't go hungry in this church. We need to take and make sure that people, when people have a need, that we do everything we can to help them through that need. We need to do that. But you know what? That adds more burden to you. Because everybody's going through burdens. But we as Christians are to be bearing each other burdens. That's what he's talking about. And we are approving ourselves as ministers of God in afflictions, in carrying everybody's burdens and such. Not just our own. Not just our own. All right? Let's go on. In afflictions, in necessities. In necessities. The necessities basically means what it says there, in the must needs of yourself. In your must needs. So what's he saying here? We ought to be approving ourselves as ministers of God in must needs. Or in other words, in living and being content with our needs being met. Living and being content with our needs being met. Now, the truth of the matter is, this is one thing that we Christians have a hard time with. This is one thing that we Christians really struggle with and such. Because we get mixed up with must needs to wants. Our must needs is what I need to sustain my life. Food and water. And by the way, food means bread. What did God feed the children of Israel? Manna. Till they grumbled and griped and wanted some meat. Truth of the matter is, they could have lived on that. Food and water. So if you have food, if you have bread and water at home for the week, as a Christian, you ought to be content with that. Well, I don't have much in the refrigerator. We don't have, we're out of pop. I don't know how we're going to buy soda pop. Really? What we have to get back to the point where we are content with just our needs being met. Who says that you have to have driving around, in a great big car or vehicle or SUV and have a 5,000 square foot home or a 10,000 square foot home if you're a family of just a few or even my cousin had 11 other brothers and sisters, and they lived in a house that was the size of, from that wall until to probably that second pew widthwise right here. They lived in a house like that. 12 brothers and sisters. They made it. The mom died when she was 40 years old with 3 or 4 kids in diapers. They made it. It's amazing. Those 12 kids did not have a mom, and the dad was not much of a dad for the first probably 10 or 15 years, probably closer to 15 years after that. But not a one of them has ever been in trouble by the law. Not a one of them has ever gotten involved in the drugs and alcohol and all that stuff. They made it. They made it. Now, what they did was they lived on bologna. I would go over there before school to catch the bus there because I'd want to ride with them. I would go in and leave early and ride my bike a mile down the tracks and stuff to go in there. And for breakfast they had bologna with ketchup on it, potato chips, and an RC Cola. I mean, that was it. That's what they had. And that's what they did. Now the truth of the matter is, their house was, there was nothing. The basement with the sewer would back up and be in the basement and everything else. They survived. They survived. They would put 2 or 3 kids in a bed, even when they got older, but they survived. Why do we think that we have to have these spacious living conditions? Why do we think that? Look, you think your kids? You think your house gets loud? You ought to put most. A lot of times there was up to 8 or 9 kids in there at one time because of the age and stuff. Can you imagine that? Without a parent? Can you imagine? And this is boys and girls. You guys just got all boys. I'm telling you what, you put some girls in the midst of that, and you got chaos. You got chaos. Now, the truth of the matter is, we think that many times we have to, these things that we have are needs, but really they're not. Really they're not. We can live with less. We can live with less. But we ought to take and get back to that point in our life where we live, say, you know what, I can do without. I could do without that. I could do without that. I could do without that. I'm at a point now where I used to get a haircut about every 4 weeks. I haven't had a haircut in at least 6 weeks, 7 weeks. I just kind of trim it up and trim my neck and trim it up and everything else. Why? Because that's almost $20. Now that my barber doesn't do haircuts and stuff anymore, here in Macomb, the next best one is about $20. So what do? You learn to adjust. Must means. We ought to all things approve ourselves as ministers of God in necessities. Be content with our needs being met. Let's go on. In distresses. What is that? What's distresses? That's tribulation from without. That's calamities in your life. Like life and death situations, calamities. You know, no matter what and how much you shelter yourself, there's always going to be calamities in your life. They're going to come. Someone in your family is going to get really bad news. Somebody in your lifetime, you'll probably have somebody in your family that will die suddenly. You'll have somebody in your family that will get the news of cancer and terminal cancer or cancer of some sort. It's going to happen. It's part of life. And as Christians, during these calamities, when these calamities happen, we need to make sure we're approving ourselves as ministers of God, while all the while giving no offense in anything that the ministry be not blamed. Think about it. I like this one. What's the next one? In distresses, in stripes. I got to thinking about that. And stripes means wounds from a stroke. Now, back in the Bible days, they would take and literally take a person and tie him to a post, and they would take and whoop them and things. And when they whipped them, they didn't whip them with just a little, just a little teeny thing or whatever. They actually used the cat o' nine tails or whatever. It was something that they used all the time. It wasn't just the fact they used it on Christ. That was a form of punishment. So it's talking about here wounds from a stroke. And I'm thinking, okay, how does that apply today? Because no one's going to take you out in your backyard or your front yard and tie you to a post and start whooping you with a whip. We're not going to do that. But here's what they do. Here's what just not too long ago, some cake bakers were forced to give well over $100,000, almost $150,000, close to $150,000 for not baking a wedding cake for a sodomite couple that were getting married. Now think about that for a minute. They basically had to go out of business and pay that. That's a whooping. The judge has done unfairly, unconstitutionally done this. Now they're still fighting it in court, but they still had to pay it. Look, we're going to go through that kind of thing in America as Christians. If you're going to take a stand for God, which we should, you will go through these things. You'll go through it. You might not get, they're not going to take you out and give you a thrashing, but you could lose your job, your career. You could take and lose many things and be penalized many things and lose everything that you owe. Standing up for Christ. But as Christians, we need to be willing to take a stand for Christ, even if it means taking stripes for it. We need to be doing it. We need to take, by approving ourselves as ministers of Christ in those stripes, all the while giving no offense in anything that the ministry be not blamed. Let's go on. In stripes, in imprisonments. That's jail. Paul thrown in the dungeon. Paul in prison how many times? I got news for you. I got news for you, that if God doesn't get a hold of this country, and even if he does, and such, and he gets Christians getting back right with him, we are going to face persecution, and it will mean jail time. What I just said just a minute ago would be enough, in the next year or so, would be enough to put me in jail. Because I mentioned sodomites, instead of calling them whatever they call them, gay couples or whatever. It was a hateful message, hateful words. I'll be jailed for that. Citing hateful speech. The truth of the matter is, I'm just calling them what the Bible says. And honestly, it's their sin, and because of their sin is why they're that way. They're no different than we are. They're no worse and no better than we are. But it's their sin. Just like people call me a Christian. Why? Because of the way I live. Well, because of the way they live, they're that way. But it's going to come a time when we could be jailed for that. Especially Christian leaders. We could be jailed for it, but we ought to be willing to do that. Let's go on. In tumults. Tumults would be in uncertainty, tossing this way and that, kind of like in a ship when you're going, being tossed this way and that. You're in the ship, and the ship going up and down the waves, and you're going this way and that way and such. It's kind of uncertainties in life. When we face the uncertainties of life, life is not, we have to face it as Christians. We have to face it as Christians. That's what faith is all about. We have to act by faith, even in these uncertainties. I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. So I've got to act today like as a Christian and stuff and such, because I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. We could plan for tomorrow, but the truth of the matter is, those plans go down the tube tomorrow. We don't know. But we do know that we need to take, even in those times of uncertainties in our life, we need to maintain that Christian testimony for God. Let's go on. In tumults, in labors. What is labors? That's toil. That's wearisome efforts. We as Christians cannot get weary in well-doing. Did not Paul tell us that? We cannot get weary in well-doing. You cannot get to a point, well, you know what? If we could just get more people involved. It seems like when something needs to be done, I'm here. I'm talking about any of you all. You think, well, okay, I'm here. I do this, and everything else. And it just seems like if we can just get more people involved, it would take some. I'm just getting weary about it. I'm just going to just back off. That's not what Paul said. We cannot be weary in well-doing. We cannot do that. You do what you're supposed to do and be where you're supposed to be, because that's what you're supposed to do, whether anybody else does it or not. We got to get to the point where we stop worrying about and looking at others and saying, well, why don't they do it? Because the truth of the matter is, we're not doing it for them, we're doing it for the Lord. So if one person shows up for soul winning, and you're the only one that shows up every week, show up for soul winning every week. And don't get weary in well doing. Don't do it. Toils, labors, weary. Don't get weary in well doing. Let's look at another one. In watchings. What is watchings? That's like sleeplessness. That's in keeping awake, like standing guard. In standing guard. All right, that's what that would be. You don't get weary. If you don't keep your guard up, Satan's going to enter in. I'm getting tired. Okay, you put your guard down, and you're gonna get punched in the face by Satan. You can't do that. You've got to make sure that you're constantly be sober, be vigilant, because your adversary, the devil, is walking about seeking whom he may devour. You've got to do it. I remember we used to box as kids and stuff and things. And my cousin had a little house, real little, like a little two-room house or three-room house, 2 rooms and a kitchen, a little bedroom, a living room and a kitchen, and just a teeny bathroom. At any rate, the living room was pretty small, but we used it as a boxing ring. And we would go over there and we would box. We'd all take turns boxing each other. And my uncle, my cousin, older cousin and stuff, I remember I was watching him box and stuff, and I saw him, you know, he would come in and he would come in like this and come in at you and stuff like that. And it was my turn to box him. And so I remember and things. And of course I was left-handed and such anyway, but I remember I said, okay, I know what I'm going to do. So he came in at me like this, and he was open like this, and he came in. And I give him an uppercut right in the chin. That man went down. And he went down the count. I mean, he was stunned. He didn't know where. We had to stop and things, because he was out. I mean, he would have been not got up after 10. I mean, and such. What did he do? He left his guard. He opened himself up. And what we have to do as Christians, we have to constantly be on guard. I was talking to somebody this last week, and I said, let me tell you something. I said, you never, because we are human in our bodies, you will always have to battle temptations. Things that you have done even when you were little and involved in when you're little and such, you will still at times have to deal with that kind of temptation. No matter how much you read your Bible, no matter how much you pray, that temptation will come. When I was 14, 15, 16, 17, and 18, I was friends with the older kids and stuff, and I was partying right along with them when they were partying. And I got to a point where, I drank an awful lot. I did other things too, but I drank an awful lot. And I got to the point where, when I would come home from work and stuff, even when I lived at home, and I come home from work, I would get me a beer out, and then I would drink and stuff that night, have several of them, and then on the weekends I'd party. But I enjoyed beer. Okay, I didn't do it like the others and stuff. I actually enjoyed the flavor of it. And I told this man, I said, to this day, now I have victory over alcohol. I don't drink, haven't had it and touched a drink or in that sort of thing for years and years and years, since 1980 or 81. No problem. But I said, I will not go into the bars and stuff, even with the state police, when they go in there do their stings. I won't do it, because I don't want to be around just the smell of it and stuff would be enough to maybe bring those temptations back. I don't want that, because those temptations you'll have to fight the rest of your life. So the truth of the matter is, we've got to be careful. You've got to stand guard. You might think you have victory over something, but you better be careful and keep that guard up, because that temptation will come back. Keep your guard up. Keep your guard up. You might think you have it whipped, but you better keep your guard up, because it will come back. Let me give you another one. In watchings, in fastings. Fastings. Now, fastings here is in a more of a broader sense. It's just basically abstinence, voluntary and religious abstinence in things. You can learn to abstain from things. You can abstain from some things for the Lord. This idea of not fasting, why can't we, why is it that we don't do that today? You got something you need from God, and you need to get God's attention, show Him you're serious, and skip some meals, and during that time, you be praying. Fasting. You see, we approve or make known ourselves as ministers of God in these things, all the while giving no offense in anything, that the ministry be not blamed. Wow, that's pretty good, isn't it? That's pretty good, isn't it? All right, let's go on. Let's go on. Verse number 6. Now we see the word by. So now we see the word by. So not just in these things, but now by some things. How do we approve ourselves as ministers of God, all the while giving no offense? How do we do that? By what? By pureness. By pureness. Pureness just means blamelessness. 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 What's the Bible say? A good name is rather be chosen than great riches. In a small town like this, it only takes one thing to ruin a testimony. In a town like this especially. Now the truth of the matter is, we need to make sure that we keep ourselves blameless. I'm not saying perfect. You'll never be perfect, but blameless in the world. There are things that we can avoid as Christians. Make ourselves blameless. Make sure that you don't have a bad name. When they mention your name, and as being a member of Victory Baptist Church, they mention your name out in the community, what do people think? Well, I know them. Look, we had a guy in our church in Calvary years and years and years ago. And this guy was a Christian businessman, owned his own business. And boy, I tell you what, he dressed the part. He was just the greatest. Came in, man, he could sing. And he would sing solos and all that stuff. And he was even a deacon at the church. But then he started hiring some of the guys. He ended up moving down to Georgia and hired some of the guys, and guys moved down there. And as a boss, he had the most foul mouth than anybody. That ruined his testimony for the Lord. That's what it means by being blameless. Look, he could look the part, and he could go to church and act the part, but it's after church, it's outside the church walls, it's in your work, and it's in your home, and it's out and about the businesses, and as you where you go and do your shopping and that sort of thing, is where the blame's going to come. How are you then? How are you then? Are you approving yourself as ministers of God? By pureness. Not only that, look at this, by knowledge. By knowledge. What is knowledge? Knowledge here is knowing. In other words, do you really know what you believe? If someone asked you, hey, why do you do that? Can you answer them? I'm talking about by Scripture. Well, that's what our pastor said. How does that tread water? Can you honestly look in the Bible and know why you believe what you believe? I don't want you going around saying, well, I'm doing this because my pastor said. No. I want you going around saying, okay, when someone asks you, why do you do what you do? Well, let me show you from the Bible. Let me show you what I learned from the Bible about this. Why do you give 90 or a tithe? Well, that's just what I believe. Why? Well, let me show you in the Bible. Can you do that? Why do you celebrate Jesus' birth and stuff? And why do you believe that and stuff that he's got? Well, let me show you from the Bible. We got a lot of people, a lot of Christians that believe, but they really don't know why they believe what they believe. Get in the book. Know this book. Be ready to answer when the time comes. We get mad about people who live on welfare and taking things and taking things and taking things and everything else. But the truth of the matter is, if all a Christian ever does is just take what they get just in church and such, and never try to learn things on their own, they're no different. That's welfare Christianity. God gave you a brain, He gave you the Holy Spirit, and He gave you the Word of God. Now learn it. Know what you believe. Be able to tell somebody why you believe that. By biblical examples. Why do you go to church every week? Why, every time the doors are open, you're going to church. Why is that? Well, let me show you Hebrews 10, 22 through 25. Can you do that? Can you do that? Knowledge. Let's go on. By kindness. This one's hard. Oops, I'm sorry, we missed one, didn't we? By long suffering. What is long suffering? Long suffering means patience with people. Patience with people. Think about that. Patience with people. We got to learn to be patient, have more patience with people. Oh, they just irritate me. I ain't got no patience for them. Well, you know what? Then you're not obeying what Paul's teaching here. Learn to be patient. Every one of us has things that will irritate each other. We all do. We all have those little quirks. We'll learn to be patient. Every one of us. There are people that are around that even, there are people that you associate with that you try their patience because of your personality. But because they put up with you, why shouldn't you put up with them? Why don't you be patient with people that are struggling in sin and such? Why don't we be patient with them? What would have happened if there was no patience shown with Damon? Would he be going through a graduate program, going and taking Bible college classes? If there was no patience, we don't learn patience. Thank God people showed patience with you, or you probably wouldn't be here right now. Patience. The people we're most impatient with are the ones that we love the most. Why is that? Why is it that we're more patient with somebody who we see just a couple of times a week than we are the one that we love the most? I don't get that. Patience, long suffering, that's patience with people. Are we approving ourselves as ministers of God in long suffering, being patient with others? All the while giving no offense in anything, that the ministry be not blamed.